welcome to you. You're listening to The Music Business Buddy with me, Johnny Amos, podcasting out of Birmingham in England. I'm the author of the book, The Music Business for Music Creators, available in hardback, paperback and ebook format. I'm a music creator with a variety of credits. I'm a consultant, an artist manager and a senior lecturer in both music business and music creation. Wherever you are and whatever you do, consider yourself welcome to this podcast and to a part of this community. I'm here to try and educate and inspire music creators from all over the world in their quest to achieving their goals by gaining a greater understanding of the business of music. Okay, so in this week's episode, I am joined by a brilliant guest by the name of Ryan Dickinson. Ryan heads up a company called Made by Ikigai, which is a company that really fascinates me. They're a full-service music agency that sits kind of, interestingly enough, between kind of production music and bespoke music, right? They create a lot of music for brands like Adidas, Samsung, Coke, Nike, Lexus, Meta, Visa, Amazon, all sorts of different places. And Ryan is an incredibly impressive guy. Ryan is the creative director of Made by Ikigai. He's a composer, he's a sound designer with decades of industry experience. But he runs a remote business in Made by Ikigai in its current incarnation. But he deals with hundreds of composers all over the world and really is one of the most outstanding leaders of understanding the nuances of how music aids a sonic identity for a brand, right? I think he's absolutely outstanding at it. And I really wanted to get him on here and just kind of pick his brains and get to understand how he does, what his processes are, what his deals are like, that kind of thing. It was a riveting conversation. I hope you enjoy it, and I'm going to hand over to the interview now. Ryan, welcome to the Music Business Buddy. It's good to have you here. How are you?
Thanks, Johnny. Yeah, good, mate. Nice to be here.
Good, man. Can I just say, but this is not the scheduled first question, but I really love the name of your organisation, right? Made by Ikigai. I am familiar with that term. It's one of my favourite philosophies. But for anybody that doesn't know about it, do you want to explain what it means?
Yeah, it's a Japanese concept, and I think the easiest way to explain it is kind of almost like visually. You'd have four circles that overlap each other, and one of them is what you're passionate about, one of them is what you're good at, one of them is what the world needs, and one of them is what you can make a living from. So where they all converge, those four things is your ikigai. So it's not your passion, it's not your hobby, it's not your job. It's kind of like your life purpose. It's the thing you get up every day to do. You love doing it, but you also can make a living from doing it.
That's brilliant. I love that. It applies to so many different things as well, doesn't it? It certainly, applies to good people like yourself, but it also applies to a border collie, right? A sheepdog that, have their purpose in life. They don't get paid. Well, they get fed, I suppose.
Yeah, my wife and I have this thing where we recognize when we're at a location of any kind, whether that's a bakery or a Airbnb or any kind of different place, where we sort of say to each other, or that person is or is not living their ikigai. So if they look really unhappy in their day-to-day work, we sort of just say to them, oh, they're definitely not living their ikigai here. And then if someone's just gushing passion and they just absolutely, you can see they're just so joyful in what they're doing, whatever that is, then we say, wow, they're definitely living their ikigai doing this thing here.
Yeah. I love that. Well, Made by Ikigai has truly mastered the art of providing superbly crafted and also appropriate music, right, for your clients. But I want to ask you about the discipline of understanding what people want, because that can be difficult sometimes. That discipline of understanding what your client wants is of paramount importance. How do you go about kind of nailing down sort of tonal references and absorbing a vision? How do you unpack that idea that somebody has so that you can supply what you do?
Well, I usually just ask for as much as possible. I sort of test the patience, push it as far as I can in terms of I'll always ask for a chat if that's a thing that's possible, but it isn't always possible. So I always find you get a lot of information that they didn't know they had, and just you uncover a lot of tidbits and ideas and right roads and wrong roads by just having a human conversation. So that's always the best course of action if possible. But in the day we live in now and the time frame that people have on jobs, that's not often that possible. In those cases, I tend to ask a lot of questions on email, ask for any assets, even back to the original storyboards. And then on the music tip specifically, it varies. People sometimes have a very, very clear idea of what they want, and they might have nailed down a very specific music reference that ticks all the boxes for the project, but doesn't meet the budget needs, or there's another reason they can't use it. Other times they're a little bit more broad in what they're after, and in those cases, I'll do some music referencing myself. In the olden days, not the olden days, but say in my previous jobs, I probably more would have gone to Spotify, just going down rabbit holes of searching for music and finding making playlists to see what sort of sticks, what feels good. Nowadays, I actually end up using our own music catalog as my referencing, because it means that if something is actually nailed, if someone really loves something, then we can use it. It can also mean that if they narrow down to a handful of songs they like, that automatically tells me the composers that I'd like to get on the job if it is a bespoke composition job. Then it gives me a pretty clear idea. If they love, they love 4 tracks and 2 of them are from one composer, then of course I'm going to go to that person and ask them to make a very specific composition for the job that we're on. And that's probably been because I've invested so much energy and time into the catalog, and it's of such quality now. That's really the way that I go about referencing for projects. I don't really go down Spotify holes anymore. I tend to reach for our catalog first and see where we go. If nothing sticks, then of course we can always go down other paths of released music to find things that are of interest. But I tend to find clients have their own references when they come to us, and that's a good jumping off point.
Okay, interesting. It's so cool that you can reference your own catalogue. When a catalogue has got that much depth and scope to it, that's really, really useful, because, sometimes it can be difficult, right, to kind of figure out what people want when they think they know what they want, but really it's something slightly different. I love that idea about, like, I know it's not always possible, but like jumping on a call and just going, can I just check, is this what you meant? Yeah, that is what I meant. Brilliant. All right, I'll leave you to it, or no, I didn't mean that part of it. I mean that part of it. Right. Good job we spoke then,
Yeah, you can save yourself a lot of time by just having a conversation, I find. So I always ask one where possible. And another thing I tend to do if they do have a working reference is, rather than just send tracks as on their own in a playlist of any kind, I try to do rough edits of music to the pictures so we can actually see it working to the pictures. I find it's a very good auditioning method. When you watch something and hear something at the same time, rather than imagine the things working together, it really breaks down and lets you see it working. And especially if it's edited to the points, in the storyline, kind of hitting the notes to a degree, I find that's a really valuable referencing method that I've come across in the last few years.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, seeing is believing sometimes.
Yeah. Leave less to the imagination.
Yeah. One of the things that really fascinates me about what you've built is where you're positioned in the marketplace, because you're kind of uniquely positioned between, sort of library / production music and also bespoke composition. Do you find that you kind of sometimes have existing catalogue that has always kind of held potential but never quite found its success home yet, its success point, and therefore you kind of find something that can then be reworked?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's what the catalogue is built on. Back in my time at Massive Music, of course, every big music agency has internal libraries of, they call them different things, dead demos, or just tracks that were being created for a project and were not selected for that project. And oftentimes, as a creative director, the ones that I thought were the best suited for the project weren't the ones that got selected. So I knew there was just tons of really great music just sitting there. And whenever I got a brief at my time at say massive, I would always go through the internal library as well as brief composers. So I could be sort of taking my fate into my own hands while I waited a few days for compositions to come back. I could just see if I could find something that worked, recraft it to the pictures. And I was actually finding a lot of success with doing that. And that sometimes the existing tracks were beating even the newly composed ones. And that was sometimes not necessarily just on quality, but maybe that the one we found was in a slightly different direction that no one had really thought about. And they had a little aha moment. It was like, oh, wow, we never thought to go that direction with it. And when you're getting bespoke composers, you generally really have to narrow down very specifically what they're after, because you're paying for someone in the studio for the day. You don't have that many shots at it. So you really want to be specific about what you're asking the composer to make. Whereas when you start going through existing compositions, you can start to delve around into different areas as well as try to land it right down the runway as well. And so when I set up Made by Ikigai, I knew that having an internal resource of kind of ready to go demos was going to be a really important thing. And I spent months and months contacting hundreds of composers, really well-known media composers around the world, and just rounding up non-exclusively the tracks that they'd composed that hadn't found a home as yet. And that's really ended up being the majority of what our company has been doing for the last year. These are great pieces of music. They're fully adaptable, and they're ready to go. And what I love, one of my personal ikigai is recrafting things, reshaping things. And I found that, I was a music composer for many years, but remixing things was something I loved doing as a composer, as releasing dance music, and also as a sound designer. I worked for many years, and cutting tracks to pictures was something that I really loved doing. So just kind of honing in on that very specific ikigai of my own was something that I knew I had a very good skill set at doing that. And I knew that when it doesn't matter when the track was composed, people don't really mind where it comes from or what it is, as long as it sounds good, works well for the film that they're making. So absolutely, we haven't been running for very long. So the internal unused demos of actual bespoke projects we've worked on is very small, but the catalog is very large of tracks that composers have made in the last few months and years in their freelance time.
That's superb. I love that because, there's so many, as you well know, Ryan, there's so many composers that put all this time into something, and then all of a sudden you go, oh, that's not worked. And I speak to composers sometimes that will feel a bit despondent about it. And I'll say, hang on, the life of a copyright is a strange and long thing, right? Sometimes something you did 20 years ago can find huge relevance 10 years from this moment, I was talking to, I spoke over the last few months on the podcast, I spoke to a few different music publishers, and they were talking about really the same thing, but just from the perspective of song pitching to record companies, and the amount of times they've taken old library and then it just changed, like kicks and snares and synth presets, and all of a sudden bang, it's become a hit record. It's just a good idea is always a good idea in one way or another.
Yeah, if a piece of music has been made with love and skill, it doesn't matter when that was. It doesn't matter if it was 3 weeks ago, 1 year ago, or 15 years ago. I guess, when you go back far enough, then it starts to have a certain sound to it, which can be a good thing. But, if we talk about a handful of years, there's no way you're going to know whether it was written yesterday or 2 years ago, to be honest.
No, that's a good point. So as a company, you are like a human first with your craft. But I just wondered what your views were on using AI at the point of ideation. If the rest of the process beyond that is kind of human made, because it's something that I'm starting to witness a lot more recently, just to kind of, that initial process, rather than kind of, creating something with prompts, for example, but more so kind of like just maybe using like Ableton's new sort of tools or whatever to kind of like generate seeds and rhythms and things, to then go, is that good? Should we spend time on that? Is that something that you're witnessing at the moment?
I mean, it's potentially something that the freelance composers that work for us use as tools within their box. That idea is not new. Using sample packs has been around for a long time. As a
Yeah.
composer myself, I use them. I use them a lot. It's what you do with them. It's how you combine them. It's how you reshape them. It's finding interesting ways to combine things. So I do view AI can be viewed as something we've had for a very long time already. It's at the point where it creates something entirely, without too much human input and just a few words popping out, that you tend to get quite generic sounding things. The idea of using it as a tool, I think every composer will use it. And it's not a new concept if we look at the idea of sampling things, which has been around for a very long time now. People have been willing, and even considering something like a drum machine. You can go flick through presets on a drum machine and find some inspiring drum pattern, and then it's what you do with that, with your human creativity and taste and curation, and deciding what layers to add is what is the interesting part of a human making music to me.
Yeah, well, I absolutely love that answer you just gave, because I kind of find myself nodding along, because a lot of the things that you've just said there are the things that I say to other people. And I'll say, look, there's kind of nothing new about a lot of the things that we're talking about, because we've had MIDI since the early 80s, right? Sampling, as you say, has been around for a long time. And the idea of kind of, something generative or something that uses randomization or probability, there's nothing new about that at all. And sometimes the sort of rebadging of it can be confusing and needlessly offensive, let's say,
Yeah, I think our job's more and more with AI coming in, with generative things coming in, and just endless possibilities, even more than there were before. Our job more and more becomes curators, using taste and interesting combinations of things, and also what you don't put into things, how you strip things back. And I think as human creators, that's going to become more and more our jobs is curators.
Right. What a great way of framing it. Love that. What about on the music supervision and the licensing side of things? Have you noticed any changes in the landscape in sort of recent times?
So on the licensing side, I've never been heavily involved in licensing released music through labels, for instance. A few projects here and there, but that's never been specifically my world. But I do speak to a lot of people out there, a lot of producers, a lot of directors and creatives. I'd say probably the biggest shift, but it's not a new one, is budget shrinking. But as that becomes more of a thing, it starts to restrict certain areas and choices. And what I found is the budgets are sort of getting now to the point, not always, but definitely on more projects than before, where they didn't have the kind of base level of money they would need for a conventional bespoke composition project, which involves demo fees, sometimes quite a lot of demo fees, a fairly healthy win fee to get talent to get into the studio for a day or two to work on projects. And that's where the catalog that we've been working on, being so adaptive, is really filling a bit of a void between library music and bespoke compositions, because it is a bespoke composition, and we're able to give many options and quickly, and we don't need to pay people to go into the studio already, because they've already done that time. It also means I'm able to be a little bit more with the composer, we're able to be a little bit more flexible on pricing, because I'm not requesting someone to go and put in 8 to 16 hours of work for a number. The track exists already, so it's just extra money in the pocket as long as we're talking non-exclusive.
Yeah, that's so clever. I'm really fascinated by where you've kind of positioned yourself there. It's so clever. It's yeah, well done. You're a clever dude, Ryan. Now you work, obviously on a remote basis, right, with hundreds of composers from all over the world. What is your approach to kind of structuring deals with composers?
It's a pretty simple one, actually. I just split 50-50 the license fee on the track. So whatever we agree with the agency that the final fee is for the music, I tell that number to the composer, and 50% of that is theirs. And
nice
that's
and
about
simple.
it. We just keep it nice and simple.
Oh.
Because I've worked as a composer myself for many years. I've also been on the other side within larger music agencies as a creative director. I've seen it from both sides. I've seen many different deal structures across many different countries, and I've seen things I do and don't like. And the fairest deal that I found is this one of an even split. Of course, when you get to actually like a sync licenser working for a release piece of music, then it would be a lesser percentage than that. But when we're in a bespoke world, a 50-50 split is as good as I've ever seen. And that was the deal that I wanted to make sure that was available to anyone that works with us. Just because it's fair. I believe that half is the art and half is finding a home and a payday for that art. And I think the two things go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other in order to, make some money in the world we are off of the art.
Yeah.
So, yeah, trying to keep it simple.
Good for you, man. Good for you. It's the best way. I think it's refreshing to hear that, because that is a good deal, right? It is a fair deal, and it's very, very simple to understand for people. So, yeah, I love anything like that. It makes a lot of sense to me. May I finally ask you about your background and what led you to here? Because you've alluded to it, already in the last few minutes about some of the roles that you've played in other companies, and I think you obviously have a very, very informed understanding of how to position, Made by Ikigai based upon some of those experiences. So what was that path for you? I know it's a big question, by the way, Ryan, so feel free to summarise as much as you wish. But
we could take up the full 45 minutes with that.
When I kind of thought about this question, I thought, it's a bit unfair, that, because it's like, it's a massive question. But what did it look like for you from the very, very early onset into, starting in this world to where you are now? What does that path look like on a sort of, summarized level?
Yeah, on a condensed version would be that after quite a few years in different bands and releasing different styles of music, there was a duo electronic duo that I was in. We released an album. Of course, didn't do much, and we hadn't made much money in any way, shape, or form across many years of releasing and playing gigs. Obviously some, but nothing too meaningful. We had a track from that album synced on a TV commercial for Australian Air Force by lovely folks over at Level 2 Music in Australia. And we had, by the standards I understand now of the industry, quite a modest sync. It wasn't anything too big, but for us, it was a crazy payday compared to anything else we'd ever done. So I'd say, and we got paid. It was not like a royalty based thing, and we'll pay you after X amount of days. After we've been through a record label deal, and those things have got so many layers to them, and at the end you have an Excel document with 1,000 blocks in it and a minus number at the end of it somehow, no matter what you've done, even after millions of streams somehow, I found. But so we had a sync, and it worked, and we got paid, and I realized that there was a good world in advertising and sync, that artists got paid for their art. And that was kind of where I really had a bit of an aha moment and started redirecting my ship in that direction. I also, after a while, I got out of making music and decided I wanted to work in sound design. It was just kind of like I'd taken 6 months off, did a bit of soul searching, and realized that I needed to be in full-time working 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, doing what I love, which I had never done before. I'd always released music and on the side, but had a regular job. So I started working as a sound designer. I worked for a number of years across video games and in advertising across a few different countries. And through there, I was kind of really in the trenches Monday to Friday with the creatives and really seeing how an ad came together, and also witnessing the music being selected and edited. After those years, I moved over to Amsterdam and started working with Massive Music as a creative director. And that was the point where I started to learn really get stuck into the idea of bespoke compositions and working with composers and briefing out to composers and speaking with creatives and understanding the concept. And I worked with Massive for about 3.5 years across Amsterdam, Singapore, and Sydney. And that brings us to the point where I decided to start Made by Ikigai. And there's many steps and layers and parts I've left out there, but it's a hyper condensed version of me from a music producer into a sound designer into a creative director, which is where we are today.
Wow, thank you so much. That's quite difficult to have done what you just did there. That's do you know, one of the, well, there's many things that fascinate me about what you just said there, but one of the things that I can't help but wonder is what happens next for you, because you've done so much, and you've built something that's really, really special, that's very useful, very successful, which speaks volumes about you and about who you choose to work with and the skills of those people too. But it also then makes me think, wow, what next? Because you've become someone that's incredibly useful to an incredibly large amount of people.
Yeah, well, a lot is coming next. Not all I can go into too much detail at the moment. But yeah, last year was a big year on many fronts, in being the first year of the company and putting it all together, and traveling a lot to get the word out and meet with many people. And I think up until a few months ago, I just assumed it was probably going to be more of that, but maybe a little bit more on the chilled side, because I really went hard in the first year. And now working with software developers, 2 different software developing teams on different things for the internal back end of the company to help running with that side of things. But then the more interesting part is working with our catalog and some tools that I think are going to be really useful for the industry, which I can't go into too much at the moment, and we haven't cracked it yet.
Okay.
But it's going to be really focusing a lot on the catalog, and I'm going to be giving that a life of its own in this year, and giving it a brand of its own. I'd say around about midway through this year, I'll put the word out, assuming that everything stays on track to get there. And then, of course, bringing partners involved, more people in the company to help in different areas around the globe. There's only so many places I can be in at once, and we have a fantastic network of freelance talent. But I think in the day-to-day runnings of the company, it will be something that I feel this year, when the right person, the right conversation happens, will start to expand to have more people on a full-time basis focused on getting the word out there and running projects alongside me. But yeah, keep an eye on this space. This year will be a year of something else coming into the world that should be quite memorable, I hope.
Wow. Okay. It's not human cloning, is it? Because you could probably do with about 10 more Ryan Dickinsons. That would solve a lot of problems, wouldn't it?
Well, but I mean, the idea of human is definitely something that is at the backbone of it. You know, I'm not really interested in exploring generative AI as something that is going to create the art. Of course, as we discussed earlier, using those tools to assist us and help with ideation and things like that, of course, that's fine. but making sure that human-made music is something that we put at the forefront of what we do. Really focus on that and the human craft and human curation, but then letting technology assist us in other areas that can help speed up many other parts of what we do is something that I'm really interested in. And I think everyone needs to be thinking about that in whatever industry they're in at the moment. So I've been putting a lot of my thought time into that for the last 6 to 12 months. And I think I've come up with something that could really be helpful for me firstly, and then many other people, hopefully after that.
Wow. Okay. This is going to be a good episode to listen back on in a few months and go, that was what he did. Okay.
Hopefully. Still got to make it first, but yeah.
Well, that's the fun bit sometimes, I guess. But
it is true. Yeah.
Ryan, you're a top guy. I really appreciate you talking to me today. I send you all the luck in the world for all of your projects, all of your ideas going forward. And I look forward to, following your story and seeing how it all unfolds. And thank you for joining me, and good luck, man.
Thanks so much, Johnny. Yeah, I really appreciate the chat, and thanks for the kind words, and keep doing what you're doing as well. It's great to have interesting conversations and get knowledge out there for the wider creative community.
It certainly is, and Ryan made that happen here today in this episode. Really, really top guy. I know I've said this before, everybody, but have you ever noticed something here, right? Is that these really, really top level people are very good people, right? Ryan's another fine example of that. He as he talked about in the interview, he's played a lot of different roles, in the industry over the years, made himself very, very useful to a lot of people because of how hardworking he is, as well as being talented. But I also think not only about what he's done and where he's at now, but where he's going to next, because I think big things lie ahead for him. And he could only softly allude to it there in that interview, but it would be nice to check back in with him in the future, because it'd be really, really, really interesting to follow his story and to see where Made by Ikigai goes next, and see where Ryan Dickinson goes next. He's a man of the now, a man of the moment, and a man of the future. And on top of that, he's a thorough gent. Okay, that's enough from me today. Have a great day, everybody, and may the force be with you.
The music